All right, ready to dive deep into light pollution. It's kind of like trying to take a perfect picture, but someone keeps photobombing you.
Yeah, like that friend who always jumps in at the last second. And it's amazing how much detail gets washed out, even if you think you've got a decent dark spot.
Right. You sent over some great stuff about light pollution filters and even telescope collimation. Sounds like you're really ready to level up those astrophotos. So, I think we should start with what causes light pollution in the first place. How does it mess with our night sky? And most importantly, how do we beat it?
Well, the interesting thing is light pollution, it's not just those big city lights, you know what I mean? It's anything, really. Houses, street lamps, those offices that are lit up all night, all kinds of stray light.
So even if I'm not in Times Square, light pollution is still lurking around waiting to ruin my pics.
You got it. All that extra light, it bounces around in the atmosphere, creates a kind of haze, and that hides the fainter light from stars and other cool stuff up there.
So that's why even when I think I found a dark spot, my photos still look kind of flat. They're missing that wow factor, those deep blacks and pin-sharp stars.
Exactly. Light pollution steals the contrast and depth, makes those fainter details harder to see. It's like it's robbing us of those jaw-dropping shots we want.
Okay, so it's not just me then. Light pollution is the reason my photos aren't quite there yet. But, I've noticed even in the city, I can still see planets like Venus, Jupiter, shining bright. Does light pollution not affect them as much?
Good observation. Those planets are bright enough to power through a lot of light pollution. It's like they have their own force field against the light haze.
That's a relief, so there's still hope for us city folks. But for anything beyond those super bright planets, we need to get serious, right? We're the big guns. I'm talking light pollution filters.
Now that's where things get interesting. Filters act like gatekeepers, letting only certain wavelengths of light through. They block others.
I've seen those filters that screw onto lenses, and I know there's digital ones too. What's the difference?
Great question. Physical filters, those attach right onto your lens. One kind is called a polarizer, and it's fantastic at cutting down reflections and haze. Think of it like sunglasses for your camera.
Oh, so that would help with things like glare from moisture in the air. That could
Yeah.
definitely make images sharper.
Exactly. Polarizers enhance the details in clouds, even celestial objects, by getting rid of reflections. And get this, you can actually rotate them to fine-tune how much reduction you need.
Wow, so you can customize how much light you're blocking. That's awesome. Okay, now the digital filters, I'm assuming those are applied later on when I'm editing.
You got it. Digital filters come in during post-production using software like Photoshop. It's like having a toolbox of virtual filters you can tweak after you've taken the picture.
So if I'm not loving how the sky looks in my photo, I can fix it later with digital filters.
Exactly. They give you a lot of flexibility in dealing with light pollution and other things you might want to change in your pictures.
Speaking of things we want to change, let's talk about that reddish-brown sky thing. I was shocked when I learned that the night sky isn't actually black. Why does that happen?
It's a common myth. That reddish brown you see sometimes, that's actually light pollution disguised. It's from all that artificial light scattering in the atmosphere.
And that's bad news for those epic deep sky photos, right? Because with long exposures, that reddish brown just gets worse.
You're exactly right. We need those long exposures to capture the faint stuff, but then they also amplify that unwanted color, washing out the details and making your images less vibrant. It's like trying to see a dim star through fog that's tinted red.
Okay, that reddish brown is definitely not helping us out. But can we do anything about it other than just complain about light pollution?
Luckily, yes. Software like Photoshop has tools that can help a lot. You can think of it as a digital detox for your pictures. One technique is to use the eyedropper tool. You sample that reddish brown and then use the levels adjustments to darken it.
So basically we're telling Photoshop, hey, this color is way too bright, tone it down.
Exactly. By adjusting what are called the RGB values, we can darken the sky without losing the details in those stars and other objects. It's like revealing a hidden layer of the night sky that was being masked.
That is a cool trick. I'm adding that to my list to try out.
As
But before we go too far down the photo editing road, remember those light pollution maps we talked about? I've seen those online, and they're crazy. Really show how much light pollution is out there.
Those maps are super valuable. They use different colors to represent how intense the light pollution is, and that helps you find those rare dark sky spots.
There are even apps that do that now, right? I've seen the light pollution map app and the dark sky meter.
See? You're on top of it. Technology makes it easier than ever to find those perfect stargazing spots. And then there's something called the Bortle scale. It's like a rating system for darkness. A Bortle 1, that's the darkest you can get, while a Bortle 9 is a bright city sky.
So the Bortle scale helps us know exactly how dark a place is. Super helpful when you're planning an astrophotography trip. I'm totally going to look up a light pollution map for my area.
Yeah.
Who knows, maybe there's a hidden gem nearby.
It's worth a shot. And it also makes you realize how widespread light pollution really is.
Okay, so we've talked about the enemy light pollution, and we've hinted at filters as our weapon. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. How do those light pollution filters actually work their magic?
Basically, those filters target specific wavelengths of light, and you guessed it, the wavelengths they target come from sources of light pollution, like streetlights.
So they're designed to block out those specific wavelengths that wash out the sky in our photos.
Exactly. Block the bad wavelengths, let the good ones through, the ones coming from stars, nebulae.
That's brilliant. It's not about blocking all light. It's about fine-tuning what hits our camera sensor.
It's all about increasing the contrast. You want to boost the difference between the objects you want to see and that background sky. It's like giving your camera night vision for the cosmos.
So you end up with those stunning images where the stars just pop against a dark background.
Precisely. We're basically uncovering a hidden beauty that's being obscured by light pollution. Now, you mentioned earlier different types of light pollution filters, broadband, narrowband, line filters. Do those all have different uses?
That's what I was hoping we could talk about next. What makes each of those filters unique? When would we use one versus another?
Let's break it down. It's like picking the right tool for the job, but in this case, the job is taking awesome pictures of the night sky.
All right, hit me with that filter breakdown. It's like we're about to unlock a secret level in our astrophotography game.
I like that. Okay, first up, broadband filters. These are like your all-rounders. Wider bandwidth, so they're blocking a broader range of wavelengths, including those pesky ones from sodium and mercury streetlights.
So they're good at filtering out the most common light pollution, right?
Exactly. And because they let more wavelengths through, they're great for those big, wide views like constellations,
Hmm.
especially if you're lucky enough to be under a darker sky.
But if they're letting in more light, wouldn't that mean they're not as good in really bright areas?
That's a good point. Broadband filters are a solid starting point, but in heavily light-polluted places, they might not be strong enough to really combat the glare.
Okay, got it. So what about narrowband filters? When are those the better choice?
Think of narrowband filters as the specialists. Much smaller bandwidth, they're targeting a very specific range of wavelengths, like snipers for light pollution.
So that's what you'd use if you're stuck under a city sky.
Exactly. Narrowband filters block out way more unwanted light compared to the broadband ones. But there is a trade-off.
I was about to ask, what's the catch?
Because they're so specific, you might see stars looking dimmer, and they can get a kind of blue-green tint. Not always ideal, especially if you want those natural star colors.
So stronger blocking, but potential impact on the colors. Interesting. What about those line filters? You mentioned they're more for actually looking through a telescope, not so much for photography.
Right. Line filters are the extreme specialists. They block out almost all light except for very specific wavelengths from certain elements, like hydrogen or oxygen, the kind of elements you find in nebulae.
Ah, so they're perfect for isolating those elements.
Yeah.
And making nebulae stand out when you're looking through the telescope.
Precisely. But for photography, they just block out too much light, so it's really hard to get a decent exposure.
Makes sense. So how do we choose the right filter with all these options? It's overwhelming.
Don't worry, I've got you covered. There are a few key things to look for.
Okay, tell me everything.
First, double-sided threading. This lets you attach other accessories, like a T-ring if you're connecting your camera to a telescope. Gives you more flexibility.
So it's like making sure my gear is future-proof.
Yeah.
I can add stuff later without needing a new filter.
Exactly. And then durability is super important. You'll be using this outside, so you need something tough, right?
Yeah.
Water resistant, scratch resistant, that kind of thing.
True. Especially with long exposures, one tiny scratch could ruin a photo. It's worth getting something durable. What about those round versus rectangular filters?
Good one. Round filters screw right onto your lens, easy peasy, but you need to get the size that matches your lens.
So if I have different lenses, I might need different filters.
That's right. Rectangular filters, on the other hand, they go in a special holder that attaches to your lens, and they're adjustable.
So it's like a universal system that works with all my lenses.
Exactly. And you can even stack them multiple filters together for different effects. Lots of possibilities there.
Okay, I'm seeing how rectangular filters could be really handy as I get more into this.
They give you a lot of control. Now, I know there are tons of filter brands out there. It's like trying to pick a candy in a candy store. How do we even start?
Exactly. What are your recommendations?
Well, for beginners, there are basic light pollution filters. They target those common wavelengths we talked about, and they're usually more affordable.
Perfect for starting out. Any specific ones you like?
The Hoya Starscape Light Pollution Cut filter is a good one. It's known for boosting contrast, improving visibility, especially around artificial light.
I've seen that one. It targets that yellow or green color you get under streetlights, right?
Yep, and it comes in different sizes for different lenses.
So it's easy to find, and it works. I like it. Any other filters we should check out?
The Ice Lipo Light Pollution Reduction filter is another great one for beginners. It's all about preventing that sky glow, especially from those sodium vapor lamps, the ones that are everywhere.
Targeting those streetlights specifically.
Exactly. It works with different telescopes, too. It
Yeah,
has a double-threaded frame, so you can stack filters if you want.
nice. Okay, those are some solid starter options. What about for people who are more experienced? What would you recommend for them?
If you want something really tough and high-performing, the K&F Concept Natural Night Filter is awesome.
The name itself sounds high-tech. What makes it so special?
Well, it's super durable, scratch-resistant, water-resistant, so you don't have to worry about it when you're out there shooting.
That's important. Peace of mind is worth a lot. It's not like you can run inside if it starts raining.
Exactly. Plus, it's got this special coating that blocks those orange and yellow wavelengths, even better at reducing light pollution.
So it's tough, it's high-tech, and it gets the job done. Like
Wow.
it. What about the Astronomic CLS filter? You mentioned that one earlier as a good all-arounder.
The Astronomic CLS is great because it works well for telescopes of all sizes. It's a solid choice if you want one filter that can handle a variety of different shots.
So I wouldn't need different filters for different types of photos.
Exactly. It strikes a good balance between blocking the bad light and letting the good light through.
And it even has a special version for deep sky photography, right?
That's right, the CCD version. Perfect for those faint details in nebulae and galaxies.
Okay, that one's going on my list. And then the Bader Moon and Sky Glow filter. Remind me what that one's good for.
The Bader Moon and Sky Glow is cool because it's not just about light pollution, it also enhances the details on planets like Jupiter and Mars.
So it's good for both deep sky objects and planets.
Exactly. It's a great choice if you want to capture both.
Awesome. Okay, now for those of us who are obsessed with nebulae, what filters are best for those?
If you have a larger telescope, the O3 filter is a great option. It isolates the light from oxygen, which is found in lots of nebulae, makes them look brighter and more detailed.
So it's like giving those nebulae a spotlight.
You got it. Really boosts the contrast so you can see all those cool structures.
And for those of us with smaller telescopes,
The ultra-high contrast, or UHC filter, is a good choice. It lets through more light than the O3 filter, but still reduces the light pollution, so you can capture those fainter nebulae.
awesome. There are options for everyone. It's like a whole universe of filters out there.
Exactly. The right filter depends on your gear, what you're trying to shoot, and your budget.
Now, remember that myth about light pollution filters making nebulae brighter? Can you explain again how those filters really work and why contrast is so important?
Yeah, it's easy to get that wrong. Filters can make them seem brighter, but they don't actually increase the light coming from the nebula. What they do is darken the background sky, so the contrast is better. Imagine you dim the lights in a room. The lamp doesn't get brighter, but it stands out more.
Oh, I get it. It's like tricking our eyes into thinking the nebula is brighter because it's popping against that darker background.
Exactly. Our eyes are drawn to contrast, and in astrophotography, contrast is everything. Reducing the brightness of that background sky really lets those nebulae stand out.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So it's not about making the nebula brighter. It's about how we perceive it against the background. We've talked a lot about filters, but there's so much more to astrophotography, right? What else helps us capture those amazing shots?
You're right, filters are just one piece of the puzzle. Another is your camera settings. Those can really make or break your photos.
Okay, I'm ready for this. What settings should we focus on when we're aiming for the stars?
Let's start with ISO. That controls how sensitive your camera is to light. Higher ISO, more sensitive, which is what you need in low light conditions.
So when I'm shooting in a really dark sky, I should crank that ISO up.
Well, not so fast. Higher ISO also means more noise, that grainy look in your photos, and that reduces detail.
Oh, so it's a trade-off, more sensitive, but also more noise.
Right. Finding the right ISO for astrophotography is a balancing act. You need to experiment a bit to see what works best with your camera and the conditions.
Got it. Okay, what about aperture? That's the size of the opening in the lens, right?
Yep. Aperture affects how much light you gather, and also the depth of field. Wider aperture, more light, which is great for those faint objects.
So wider aperture means I can capture more of that precious starlight.
You got it. But wider aperture also means shallower depth of field. Only a small range will be in focus.
That's true. In astrophotography, we usually want everything in focus, from the closest stars to those faraway galaxies. So we need to use a narrower aperture.
It really depends on what you're going for. Some astrophotographers like to play with depth of field, get creative with it, but usually, yes, a deeper depth of field is better to make sure everything's sharp.
Okay, so aperture is a double-edged sword, affects both light and focus.
Hmm.
Now, what about shutter speed? That's how long the sensor is exposed, right?
Sure, on a roll. Shutter speed is all about capturing those beautiful star trails. Longer shutter speed, more light you gather, but you also increase the chance of the stars turning into streaks instead of sharp points.
Because the Earth is rotating, so the stars seem to move across the sky during the exposure.
Exactly. And the longer the exposure, the more those trails show up.
So again, it's about balance. Enough light, but no streaks.
Finding the right shutter speed is key. There's some handy formulas and guidelines to help you figure out the longest you can go before the star trails become noticeable.
Cool. Okay, so far we've got ISO, aperture, shutter speed. Anything else we should be aware of?
One more important one, white balance.
Ah.
It's about adjusting for the different colors of light so your photos are accurate.
So if I'm shooting under moonlight, I need to adjust my white balance so the colors in the night sky look right.
Exactly. Different light sources like moonlight or starlight, even light pollution, they all have different color temperatures.
And our cameras need to know how to compensate for that so the stars and nebulae look right.
Precisely. Setting the white balance correctly is crucial for capturing those true colors. Think of it like giving your camera the right glasses to see those colors accurately.
Okay, so ISO, aperture, shutter speed, and white balance. Those are our four musketeers of astrophotography.
That's a great way to put it. Mastering these settings is super important for capturing those stunning photos. And one more tip that will make your life easier when you're editing those photos later.
Oh, anything that makes editing easier is welcome. Tell me.
Shoot in RAW format.
Raw format, what's so special about that?
RAW files have all the data from your camera sensor, nothing
Mhm.
compressed or processed. You're capturing the purest form of your pictures.
So it's like having the raw ingredients for my astrophotography meal.
Perfect analogy. RAW files give you so much more control when you edit. You can change the white balance, exposure, colors, all without losing quality.
That makes sense. All right, raw format it is. So filters, camera settings, raw format. I'm feeling like a pro already.
You're well on your way. Remember, there's always more to learn in astrophotography. So many techniques and tools out there.
This has been an amazing journey, from the challenges of light pollution to those awesome filters that help us fight back. And now we're talking camera settings, raw format. I'm so ready to put all this into practice.
I'm excited for you. Practice makes perfect. Every photo you take is one step closer to mastering the art of astrophotography.
I love that. And I'm ready to keep learning. What other advanced techniques should we explore?
In the next part of our deep dive, we'll unlock even more secrets of astrophotography. We'll talk about image stacking, where you combine multiple images to create one super image, and then we'll get into the art of post-processing.
Image stacking. Sounds cool. I can't wait to hear more about that.
It's amazing for capturing those really faint details. And post-processing, that's where you really get to be creative, enhance those raw images, and create something stunning.
This is getting me so pumped to go out and start shooting. I can't wait to hear what other secrets you've got. Bring on part 3. All right, I'm ready for those advanced astrophotography secrets, especially that image stacking. Sounds like something straight out of Star Trek.
It does sound futuristic, but it's really changing how we do astrophotography. And the best part is, you don't need a spaceship to try it.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
But seriously, what is it and why is everyone so excited about it?
Think of it like a puzzle, but instead of cardboard pieces, we're using pictures, take multiple shots of the same part of the sky, and then software helps us combine them into one amazing image.
So it's like taking the best parts of each photo and merging them together.
Exactly. By stacking those images, we reduce noise, those faint details become clearer, and the overall image is just better. It's like boosting the clarity of a signal while getting rid of the static.
So we're making those whispers from distant stars and galaxies louder.
You got it. This is especially powerful when you're after those faint objects like nebulae and galaxies. It's like giving your camera superpowers for seeing deeper into space.
That's so cool. How many photos do we need to stack to really see a difference? Like hundreds.
More is always better, but you don't need to go crazy. Even 5 or 10 images can make a big difference in the noise and those hidden details.
Okay, that's not as bad as I thought. Now, you mentioned something called dithering, which sounds pretty technical. What is that, and how does it work with image stacking?
Dithering is a trick to outsmart our camera sensors. Basically, you move the camera just a tiny bit between each picture.
Hold on, we're moving the camera on purpose. Wouldn't that just make everything blurry?
It might sound weird, but it works, I promise. You see, camera sensors aren't perfect. They have these tiny imperfections, and those create noise in the image. By dithering, we're moving those imperfections around randomly in each shot.
So we're kind of scrambling them up so they don't line up perfectly when we stack the images.
Exactly. And then when we combine the images, that noise gets averaged out. It's less noticeable in the final stacked photo.
That's clever. Dithering, got it.
Hmm.
What other techniques can help us take our astrophotography to the next level?
Dark frame subtraction is another important one.
Dark frame subtraction. Okay, that one sounds a bit intimidating.
Don't worry, it's not that complicated. Think of dark frames as a way to capture the noise from your camera sensor itself, separate from the light coming from the sky.
So it's like taking a picture of the noise the sensor makes.
Exactly. We take these dark frames with the lens cap on, same settings as our regular photos, which are called light frames. And then when we're editing, we subtract those dark frames from the light frames.
So we're basically removing the sensor's noise,
Right.
leaving just the image of the sky.
That's the goal. Dark frame subtraction is great for getting rid of hot pixels, those bright spots that show up sometimes. Think of it like digitally erasing those spots.
Makes sense. We're cleaning up the background noise so the stars can shine. Okay, so image stacking, dithering, dark frame subtraction. These sound amazing, but I have to admit, I'm a little nervous about the post-processing part. Is it hard to learn?
Post-processing can seem daunting, but it's like anything new, it gets easier with practice. And the results are definitely worth it. You take those raw images and turn them into something truly special.
All right, you've convinced me. What are some of the key post-processing techniques we should learn to make our photos look their best?
One of the most basic but important is adjusting the levels and curves. This gives you control over the brightness, contrast, how the light and shadows look in your image.
So we're fine-tuning the light and dark areas in our night sky photos to make them really pop.
Exactly. By adjusting levels and curves, you bring out details, enhance the contrast, and make the image much more visually striking. It's like taking a decent photo and making it a masterpiece.
I like the sound of that. What about color adjustments? I've seen some astrophotography images that are so colorful, almost surreal. Can we do that with post-processing?
Absolutely. Color adjustments let you change the hues, the saturation, and how balanced the colors are in your pictures. It's like painting with light. You can bring out the natural beauty of the stars and nebulae, or even get a bit more artistic with it.
So it's not just about making the colors look real, it's also about exploring different looks and styles.
Exactly. Post-processing gives you the freedom to be creative and express your own vision. You've got this whole palette of colors to work with.
That's awesome. Now, what about noise reduction in post-processing software? I've heard about that. Is that something we should be using for astrophotography?
Noise reduction can be really helpful, especially when you've shot at higher ISOs or used long exposures. That's when you tend to get more noise, that grainy look.
So it's like smoothing out those rough edges, making the photo look cleaner.
Exactly. It can really enhance the overall clarity of your images.
Okay, so levels and curves, color adjustments, noise reduction, those are some powerful tools. Any other post-processing tricks we should be aware of?
There are tons more, but mastering those basics will give you a solid foundation for creating amazing photos. And don't forget about cropping and sharpening. Simple things, but they can make a big difference too.
This has been an incredible journey. We've covered light pollution, those filters that help us combat it, dove into camera settings, and now all these advanced techniques like image stacking and post-processing. I feel so inspired and ready to take my astrophotography to the next level.
That's great to hear. Just remember to have fun, embrace the challenges, and keep exploring. There's so much out there waiting to be discovered and captured through your camera lens.
I love that. I'm so grateful for all the knowledge and advice you've shared. I can't wait to go out there and start putting it all into practice. Who knows, maybe someday my photos will be in a gallery.
You never know. Keep practicing, keep experimenting, and don't be afraid to chase those dreams. Clear skies and happy shooting.